Kill me! I'm here! Kill me!
Hey everybody, this is Matthew Movies coming at you with my review of The Founder, the 2016 Michael Keaton movie about Ray Kroc. Now, if you don't know who Ray Kroc is, I don't blame you. He's surprisingly not as famous as you think he would be for the guy whose life story is in this movie. He is a gentleman who met a couple brothers whose last name was McDonald, and he was introduced to their process at their restaurant and convinced them to make a deal with him where he could franchise their restaurant, and as a result McDonald's was born. And this is a fascinating story for me. I think Michael Keaton's performance is stellar, and I just absolutely love how he's on fire again as an actor. Like after Birdman, then you got Spotlight, now this, and it's just been so great to see him have a comeback like this, because I've been a long time fan of his. I mean, I grew up watching Batman, and he will always be my Batman, and it's just been so wild to see him have this real career resurgence. And I think this movie is definitely on par as far as the level of performance he gives as both Spotlight and Birdman. Now, I'll say this, I don't think he necessarily has as much to do. I mean, the character doesn't go through as much of a range of emotion, or at least in a showy kind of way like Birdman, or doesn't have the potential to be as stoic as he was in Spotlight, but I think he was phenomenal in this movie. I'm surprised that this movie hasn't gotten a lot more critical notice and wasn't up for some awards, because I think he was definitely award worthy in this movie. I absolutely loved his performance, and like I said, I think the story is absolutely fascinating. I mean, I always had heard the name Roy Kroc, or not always, but I had heard that in the past when I read kind of some articles about the history of McDonald's that come up on Facebook or whatever. But I had no idea how exactly he took this concept that these two brothers came up with and spread it around the world, and then usurped complete power from them. And it was really interesting to see how that all played out. He is not a likable character by the end of this movie. He does some pretty morally questionable, if not reprehensible, things, and yet there's something about the whole story that you kind of still manage to almost be rooting for him, even though you feel awful for the two brothers who he ended up taking advantage of. And there's so many things in this movie where he comes off like a complete dickhead, especially by the end of the movie, when you see how he basically anything he wanted he was gonna take. And it's not a very justifiable or respectable thing to do in life, but yet he was also working so doggedly at what he did. And he's the main character, so everything's kind of told from his standpoint, so it's almost hard not to root for him. But then by the end of the movie, one of the things I love about this movie, and one of the things I love in any movie that's based on a true story, and this is right at the end of the movie, but this is not a spoiler in any real way whatsoever. I'm a guy who hates spoilers, avoids them like the plague, but this is not something that reveals anything about the story whatsoever. So if you're worried about spoilers, don't worry about what I'm about to say. Basically, at the end of the movie, they have the cards that come up that say, this is what happened after the movies take place, which is something I always love in a movie. And a couple of the things that came up, you were just like, oh, brutal. But at the same point, gives such a magnetic and charismatic performance that it's hard not to root for him, even though rooting for him is rooting against people that it's much easier to empathize with, and you feel much worse for. There isn't a bad performance in this movie. Nick Offerman's also in it, and so is Laura Linney, and both are absolutely great in their roles. I loved this movie. I thought it was great across the board. There really wasn't anything I could point out as being something that I thought was poorly done or poorly acted or directed. All of it across the board, I thought this movie was spectacular. Like I said, I'm really surprised that this isn't getting a lot more attention, because it's a fascinating story. It's a story about something that pretty much everybody in the world knows about. I mean, they've done studies of people in third world countries who recognize Ronald McDonald, and yet somehow it's kind of flown under the radar. I definitely suggest to people that if they're, you know, the type of person who likes these kind of like biopic movies, but doesn't necessarily have to have like the, you know, the big moments where you're like rooting for this guy and he overcomes all the odds, because that's not in this movie whatsoever. It's much more of a realist story and like perspective on the brutal nature of business, and it's very, very interesting, I think. And if I highly suggest people check it out. So those are my thoughts on The Founder. Let me know in the comments below if you've A, heard of this movie, B, are interested in this movie, C, have seen this movie. Please hit that like button. I love getting likes because it means that eventually YouTube will put my videos in front of people that otherwise wouldn't have seen them. And I love getting new people to check out my videos because I love talking to you guys about movies. And speaking of which, if you're new to this channel, please hit subscribe because I'd love to keep you around and have a dialogue with you about the movies we love and hate. You can tell me I'm wrong. You can tell me I'm an idiot. I'm perfectly fine with all of that. Just stick around and have the conversation. Other than that, have yourself a nice day.